Welcome to Live Streams. Glad that you are here tonight. This is a one-stop shopping experience of great food, a time to be refreshed. It is also a time of learning, and we're going to do that tonight in all kinds of ways. And then hopefully, through the things that we will learn, we will become all that God has called us to be. You should know by now, but just in case you are visiting for the first time, the inspiration for live streams comes from Psalm 1, where the life of the blessed man is described as a tree that is planted by the streams of water. And from that, we get our vision to tap into that stream, which represents the Word of God, which truly is relevant for our lives. And so, Lord willing, tonight, you'll be able to take home, doggy bag, take home some good application that you can apply into your life right away. Now, you know that live streams is about little mini-series, right? We don't want to just have one and done, but we want to have a little series, give you an opportunity to warm up and really think and interact, send us texts and emails, and tonight you even got some paper, huh? Good old-fashioned paper. So you can write down your thoughts so we can just really think about the topic that is at hand. And take a look on the screen. Our topic is life crisis. And you see that number 4? That's 4 weeks of crisis. How fun is that? We're going to have 4 weeks together with our lives crashing down and then figuring out through God's Word how we're going to put that back together again. Now, this is a topic that all of us can relate to, right? No matter what chapter of life you are in. I see young people here. I see other people here. No matter what situation you are in, you will be able to apply this into your life. Because you know what? We all feel that, right, at times? We feel like everything is falling apart and everything is just spiraling out of control. Last week when we began the first of this winter season, we talked a little bit about that. And so this series spins out, if you will, out of that concept of spiraling out of control. So when our lives do that, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to spend 4 weeks talking about that. And tonight is just a warm-up. We're going to pace ourselves here. So take a look at our blackboard. Number 1, tonight, we're just going to try to just understand it. We're just going to understand and diagnose the situation. To use a medical analogy, and I've used this before, and I've used this picture before of diagnosing the situation. Remember that? I've done presentations before where I've said to you, diagnose before you operate. You guys know how important that is, right? From a medical perspective, diagnosis is everything. You got to get the diagnosis right, and then you operate. Now think about it. What if you get the diagnosis wrong? Then the operation is a real problem, right? And so in the same way, we want to make sure that we diagnose or understand the situation before we get going here. And so tonight is all about diagnosis. It's about understanding you. Now, you guys know yourselves way better than I know you. And so you know what's coming? Anyone? Pop quiz, all right? So we're going to take a pop quiz right now. Boys and girls, no complaining. Take out your number 2 pencils. It's inside a little cup in the middle of your table. And we have the proctors walking around handing out the pop quiz, okay? No cheating tonight. Do not look at your neighbor's paper. But in a minute, after you get your quiz, all you got to do is check. That's it. Check. Check the box that applies to you. That is it, okay? Tonight is about life crisis. In fact, everyone, I don't care if you're single or married or whatever, everyone look at both sides of the test. You guys ready? Who doesn't have a test? Raise your hands. Okay? Who doesn't have a pencil? Raise your hand. You guys ready? Okay, Mr. Music Maker, are you ready? He is ready. Ready? Set? Go! 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Put your pencils down. Okay. Now, wasn't that fun? That was fun, wasn't it? To see what areas of your life might come crashing down. It's very important for you to diagnose yourself. If you go see a professional counselor, that's the first session, is just trying to understand what's going on. You go through a whole bunch of things. Now, on the one hand, it was fun and easy to take a little pop quiz, wasn't it? But I don't want to make light of the situation, because real life isn't a 5-minute pop quiz. But real life takes hours and hours to try to figure out exactly what is going on. So really the test was to get you going, get you thinking, inspire you that if this little fun test would just make you go home and think and help you to isolate the things in your life. That's what it's about. But again, I don't want to make light of it. It's very, very difficult, and sometimes it's complicated. And so let's keep on going and talk about diagnosis tonight. Diagnosis can actually be quite complicated, and for 2 reasons. Take a look at the blackboard. The first reason is that you might be innocent. Now, you might be going through some real hard time right now, and the truth is, you might be innocent. Now, technically, no one is innocent, right? We're all sinners before God, but there is a situation where you're innocent, and hey, you were just blindsided by something you had nothing to do with. Does that happen? Oh yeah, it does. Do you remember that situation when Jesus and his disciples were walking along the road and they see a blind man? You know which situation I'm talking about? And they ask Jesus. They say, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? You see, there was that very simple theology that says if you're in trouble or if you're suffering, it's because of something you did wrong or your parents did wrong. Well, it's not that easy. It's complicated. Jesus says, and he points it out, he says, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. Now, how crazy is that? How mysterious and awesome that God's work is actually carried out in the suffering of the innocent. Now, you guys know that, right? In fact, let me ask you, do you know the classic example in the Bible, tell me who it is, of the guy who suffered, even though from beginning to end, he was innocent? Right? Right? And so what I'm saying is, I don't want to dummy down or simplify the situation and make it seem like, hey, you did something wrong and you got to fix it. Got to at least acknowledge that it's complicated, right? Sometimes, things happen. There's drive-by shootings. There's accidents. There's all kinds of things that come upon us that are unexplainable. And we need to at least acknowledge that category, and we need to enter this little series on life crisis with our eyes wide open and recognize all the different realities. And number one, the innocence of the victim is a very real thing. Now, the second one is also something that makes it complicated, and that is the simple passage of time. Sometimes time just passes, like your situation just gradually gets worse and worse. You know what I mean? All of us have experienced it where it's not just like, bam, and then your whole life falls apart, but usually it's like gradually, like things start piling up, and then you fall apart. That happens a lot in all of our lives. And to make that point, I have something to show you. Roger. Okay?
Can I go get it?
Please. Open the door. Open both doors, Roger. Okay, Julie, thank you. All right. Sometimes, or check that, most of the time, it's the gradual piling up of stuff in your life that causes you to break down. No, Roger, come over here. Come over here. All right? Come over here. All right, there you go. Okay. All right, thank you, Roger. Come on over here. I need your help.
Okay.
Take that plastic bag.
Yes, sir.
Roger has no idea. But that's what makes it fun. All right. This bag represents your heart. Okay? So Roger, hold that bag. Okay? Sometimes stuff happens. Stuff comes into our life and it begins to weigh very heavily on our heart. Like Family problems. A bigger rock? Okay, bigger rock. Family problems. Kids giving you a hard time. Taxes, okay. Taxes. All right. I mean, hey, I don't know what that is, but it's making me, And sometimes it's little things that weigh very heavily on our hearts. And you know what? It begins to get very, very heavy. You all right, Roger?
I'm doing okay.
For now. And sometimes things really hit us hard.
Sorry.
And that's what happens to our hearts. Let's give Roger a hand. The point is, it's one stone at a time. It's one piece of dirt or one rock that represents marital issues or family problems or you lost your job or something, and then there's that big rock. That did it. And sometimes we don't know how to respond and how to deal with it. And what happens is, if that sort of happens over a period of time, let's say 5, 10, 20 years, 30 years, you know what happens? You start feeling so bad, and when people say to you, hey, what's wrong? You start saying things like this, and I know you said it at one point. You say, I don't even know where to begin. Okay? It's like so much has happened. I don't even know where to begin to describe my situation. You know what I'm talking about? That's what happens all the time, because people usually wait till the last minute to come to my office, right, to talk about their problems, and I say, well, what's wrong? They're like, they always start with a classic line, Pastor, I don't know where to begin. And I say, it's all right. It's usually like that. Okay? And so we begin, but it's very difficult to gather all the parts together because so much has happened, and it wears very heavily on our hearts. But you know what? Even though it's like that, even though it's complicated, you still have to try. Okay? Even though it's that difficult, you still have to try to diagnose the situation, because if you don't, what's going to happen is you're going to start swirling. You're going to start spiraling. And the scholars call that the downward spiral, like a whirlpool. Your life is going to go down. But that's what this series is about. It's about a life going down, and then what are we going to do? How are we going to fix it? And so let's wipe the blackboard here. In fact, take a look. I'm going to erase those two to create some room, and we're going to keep on going. I'm going to encourage you tonight to diagnose yourself, your situation. And to begin with, I want you to discover, and I want you to look at the key words very carefully. I'm going to use these words next week as well. Contributing factors. I want you to discover the contributing factors. Factors that contribute to your life crash. What are they? Now, that could be a bunch of stuff. You saw the pop quiz. There's a bunch of stuff on there, but hey, there could be more. That quiz could have been 10 pages long. There's that many categories to our lives. Let me comment on a few of them. In fact, can I use the analogy of a warehouse? Like a very large house with lots of boxes. That warehouse represents your life, and all those boxes represents parts of your life or issues. And boy, there are a lot of boxes there, huh? And those boxes, here's my point. You're going to have to open those boxes, all right? We're going to find out what is making your life crash. Start opening, okay? So guys, you need to start taking inventory and start opening the boxes. Ladies, you're going to have to do the same. And so you need to roll up your sleeves. And by the way, there is nothing wrong with getting someone to help you open up those boxes. That's what counseling's about. Sometimes you don't know how to open up those boxes, but the counselor is there, and he's going to help you open up and help you understand what is inside. But in those boxes are all kinds of stuff. Let me mention an important category. Let's start with spiritual factors. You took a little quiz on that, but let me just comment on a few things that's not on that little quiz. There are spiritual things in your life that are weighing very heavily on your heart. Now, this is very broad, but it's very important to say. For example, you need to check your values and your priorities. I know that's very broad, but this is so important. You know why? When your life crashes, it really shows what's important to you. Think about that. If your life is falling apart, it absolutely shows what's important to you. One scholar said it this way. He says, think about it. When you're going through a hard time, suffering invariably reveals the allegiances of our heart. That's a good phrase, isn't it? It's the idea that it shows you what's important to you. That's why you're crashing, because you lost what was really important to you. Maybe it's not supposed to be important. Maybe it is, I don't know. But the point is, it definitely reveals a lot about what you think is important. So check it. That's what we're doing tonight. Check, check, check. That's what it's about. Take a look at the next category. Check your sins. Now, I did already mention John 9, right? The blind man, it wasn't his sin, but in this case, or this category right here, check your sins. Because in a lot of cases, sin is involved. Now, it's not going to be on the screen, but let me just talk real quick, because I've got a lot of stuff to cover, and I'm just going to rapid fire them tonight. In terms of checking your sin, you should check what I call unchecked sins. Things that you just sort of leave alone and just let grow and grow. Now, if you've been here at the last season of live streams, we started by talking about that, how if you leave something unchecked, it actually starts growing. You remember Cain in Genesis chapter 4? He let his sin grow, and it grew like a lion. God used the language of a lion that is about to pounce on him. And so that's the idea. You leave it unchecked, it's going to grow, and it's going to devour you. Now, talking a little bit more about this, checking your sins, there are also sins that if you leave unconfessed, it's going to weigh very heavy on your heart. If you're going to just leave them in your heart, now, you know the classic example of David and Bathsheba, right? David left that sin in his heart, and he was very distressed about it. And in Psalm 32, King David said this. He said, "Blessed is the man whose sin the Lord does not count against him, and in whose spirit is no deceit." Now watch, I italicized it. "When I kept silent, my bones wasted away through my groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me. My strength was sapped as in the heat of summer." Wow. It's saying that God is actually involved in your crisis, in your depression, in that weighed down feeling. Have you ever thought about it that way? That God is actually pushing you down with his hand? Well, hey, if you leave sin unconfessed, God is pressing down on you because he wants you to do something about it. You shouldn't be happy. You should be down. And so in that sense, it's very important that you understand that unconfessed sins can actually bring you down and make you spin out of control. Now, I'm looking at the clock, and we got a lot of great things tonight, so I'm going to pick up the pace here and talk about the next category, psychological factors. And but there's a lot here, but I'm just going to mention one. Maybe your personality. Maybe you have a kind of personality that is a factor, that kind of is gloomy, or you're kind of dark or down or negative all the time, okay? Everything's gloomy to you. Maybe you're like that. And so that could be a factor as well. There are emotional factors. Keep on going. Your emotions, huge. Definitely plays a part in the crises in your life and make you spin out of control. There are physical factors as well. Let me ask you, have there been any changes lately in your life? Okay? Any changes? Trouble getting off the couch? Huh? Now, I'm not saying that all fat people have crises, okay? I'm fat and I'm all right, okay? I'm working it out, all right? I'm exercising. Maybe age can be a factor. Now, I'm not saying getting old automatically leads you into a crisis, but, some people don't age gracefully. You know what I mean? That can be a major factor as you deal with limitations and problems with your body. Aging can be a major factor. Listen, you're not one of these anymore, right? Okay? You ain't no spring chicken. It's sorry to break the news to you. I know you used to look like this, okay? Not anymore, all right? Things are different now. And some people age disgracefully, you know what I mean? And that can be a factor. Keep on going. There are lifestyle factors. Look on the top right. You need to check your habits. Now, whether you're, whatever life chapter you are in, let me ask you, do you have any addictions? Okay? Are there addictions in your life? Are you neglecting because of that your body, your health? Those things can really break you down. Check your stewardship, for example. How are you spending, managing the resources that God gave you? Are there mounting debts in your life? All these things can weigh very heavily on you. Are you a shopaholic? Okay? Those things can become a problem. So check and check and check. That's what you got to do. That's the first step, okay? There's a lot to this process. Tonight, it's just the first night. We're just going to keep on checking. So let's wipe the blackboard and bring in relational factors. This is actually a very, very big category. Check your relationships with your parents. Now, I'm not talking to young people, but I'm talking to everyone. Check your relationship with your parents. But just to use an example of a child, okay? A child can be depressed. There's all kinds of studies today to talk about depressions, even in preschoolers. How crazy is that? But depression basically is a person that has completely lost all motivation to move on. No inspiration whatsoever. Completely discouraged. And did you know that the Bible actually connects a child's depression to who? To the parents. It says in Colossians chapter 3, verse 21, fathers, do not embitter your children. That's like provoking them to anger, or they will become discouraged. Now, in the original Greek, the word discouraged there is a very picturesque word of an ocean and of a boat. But the point is, the boat's going nowhere. It's just sort of floating aimlessly in the water. And that's the word that is used to describe the discouragement of a child. The child just given up. He just given up because a father constantly provokes and puts him down, or mother. So the principle is here that parents can be very active in breaking down the child. And you know what? After a while, teenager, he's just going to totally give up, drop out of school. And sometimes they do that to punish the parents, okay, for all that they have done. So check, check, check. That's what we're doing tonight. We're going to keep on checking, wipe the blackboard, and bring in everybody's favorite topic, in-laws, okay? Son-in-law, daughter-in-law, father-in-law, who is usually a harmless creature, okay? Spends his day sleeping. He wakes up for dinner, though. All right. But then there's the mother-in-law, right? Any mother-in-laws in here? Any mother-in-laws? Not all mother-in-laws, okay, but some, all right. So check. Check your marriage. Huge category here. Because in that category, there's a ton of unmet expectations. And inside there, you'll find all kinds of things that will lead to anger and bitterness and a life crisis. And so check, check, and check. And let's keep on checking because we're up against the clock. And we're going to talk about now situational factors such as, hey, unplanned pregnancies. Hey, that can make your life spin out of control. Unplanned, unexpected, and unwanted. Complications, sicknesses, you're shut in. Or, especially these days, because of the economy, you lost your job. And boy, that's just like a hammer that just drops down on you. Not making light of any of these things. Losing your job, family crisis, runaway, abductions. We have human trafficking going on right here in Orange County. It's just out of control right now. Divorce, death. We have, to me, one of my concerns, bullying, which has led to so much suicide these days. They even have a term for that, bullycide. And so that represents the phenomenon today of so many kids that are being bullied and pressured, not just physically, but through the internet as well. And so we see that going on. Or what if something terrible, God forbid, that you were raped or abused in some way? That becomes a major factor in your life crisis. Check all of those things. Check in your life any delays. For example, you are at a certain chapter in your life, and that chapter represents certain things, but it hasn't happened. For example, you thought that you would be married by now, but you're not. So a delay in that life chapter, the inability to get married, or unable to have children can become a real problem, or unable to retire. You want to, but you can't, or unwilling to retire. Well, I could go on and on and on. But the point is, there are so many things, right, in your warehouse. So many boxes. Which one? Which one contains the more serious things that you got to talk about? And tonight, there's all kinds of things. I left out, by the way, about 40 categories. There's that many that we could talk about. But tonight, we got a lot of good stuff. Just cut it very short. So these are just some of the factors that lead to a life that is falling apart. Now watch, okay? Watch. None of these things. Do you see that? Let me do it again. None of these things. Let me do it again. None of these things are actually the cause of your life crisis. None. None of these things are the cause of your life crisis. They contribute to it, but they are not the cause. I want to make that clear. In fact, what is the cause? What's the real cause of a life crisis? The answer, we will find out next week. Okay? Hey. I said we're going to pace ourselves, right? We're going to pace ourselves. What was tonight about? Looking at the clock, I'm 5 minutes behind schedule. But it's all about understanding. That's all I wanted to accomplish tonight. Get you thinking. And the next week, we'll talk about the various ways that people respond to our crisis, and we'll talk about the real cause of the crisis. But right now, we got a special 10-minute thing that we want to do before you guys get a break. Break happens in about 10 minutes or so. That's when the preschool moms have a chance to go home. If you don't, then your kids go to the gym and run around. And so what we're going to do for these 10 minutes, this is not John's special show, but John's just going to come up and he's going to respond to what I have to say. So everyone, Jon Stewart.
Very interesting, Dave. Very interesting.
All right.
There's a secular version of this that asks the question, why do bad things happen to good people? And perhaps we would say, where's God in all this? Why would he allow these things? And we don't want to tip your hand, and you previewed next week, but let's start there. Where's God in all this?
He's in so many places, John. And it really have to bring it down to what categories we're talking about. I mean, you got the life of Joseph, for example. In all the twists and turns in his life, God was there. But in that specific situation we call, let's say, family crisis or dysfunction, brothers throwing you into a pit, being sold as a slave. Yeah. And he didn't know it until what? The end of the book of Genesis, when he looks back. And so there's that aspect of where is God? Well, sometimes in retrospect, you look back and you begin to see. And the Bible actually has a lot to say about the retrospect. We have a saying today, it's hindsight is 20/20. And there's something very true about that, where don't you look back and you see God's hand in a way that you didn't see before? That reminds me of Psalm 103, verse 2. It says, praise the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits. And there's the retro perspective of looking back. Sorry, I'm preaching.
No,
but go
okay.
ahead.
Now,
There's a lot to that.
Jesus said, in this world, we're going to have tribulation. We're going to have trials. God
Talked
teaches
about that
us
last
through
week
these
too,
things.
Uh-huh.
So clearly this happens. Paul talked about a thorn in the flesh, the fact that he was taught through something. He asked God, and God says, my grace is sufficient. So perhaps starting out with a little bit of what should our attitude be toward a crisis, like where is God, or perhaps he's teaching me through this.
He is. He definitely is doing it. And we touched upon this last week as we're getting warmed up to this, that there are so many places, not just Joseph, but elsewhere that does talk about that, John. James 1 was mentioned last week too, how the trials come into our lives, but it should not cause a crisis, but actually rejoicing, because God is actually using it to mature us. And I think all of us would say that tragedies or hard times are a better teacher than successes. We learn from those hard times more.
Absolutely so. Now, of course, Job in the Old Testament, he's the classic example of somebody who was tested to the limits. Is God trying to turn us all into little Jobs and through suffering teach us the hard lessons that perhaps we didn't learn through the good times?
I'm not sure about that. That's a really heavy question, John, because there's a lot of things going on in the book of Job that I don't think represents all of God's plans. There's something very unique about there where clearly Job was innocent from beginning to end. And there was the factor of God allowing Satan to mess with him. And clearly his friends were representative of the ones with that simple theology that says, you must have done something wrong. Right? But we can't say that that represents all of the experiences that God has for us. I mean, there's so much more, but clearly that's the suffering of the innocent man. But there's so many other places. You mentioned, by the way, 2 Corinthians last week.
Right.
And there's riches there of how the suffering makes us into better people, but also brings out God's plan for our lives. So
now, is there a problem if we're going through a crisis and we compare ourselves to somebody else? Lord, why do I go through so many things and this other person doesn't? Or perhaps even bad people, non-Christians seem to be doing well. They're flourishing, and the believers are the ones that seem to have more than their fair share of troubles. Is it a bad approach to ask why other people are having their situations different than mine?
I think, I'm not sure what you mean by the word approach, but let me respond this way. I think God is a patient God that allows for us to kind of complain to him about the things that are unjust, that we see, that are unfair, that whole feeling like, why am I going through this? Why is my family going through this and my neighbor is not? And it reminds me of Asaph in Psalm 73, who really struggled with the success of the wicked. And he said his foot almost slipped, meaning his faith was almost lost as he saw them succeed when he was not. And I think because that went on for like 12 verses there, you got to say that God allows us to kind of go to him and say, hey, Lord, why is it like this? I think theologically, John, we can go to God in prayer and just complain and say, Lord, I don't get it. Why is it that my life turned out this way, or my son has died, or you know, did you hear the story on ABC News about that family in Seattle? This just happened last week, where they were playing in the snow. Father turns around for a split second, and the 6-year-old daughter fell into the river that was rushing down, and he was just running. And I'm just reading this, and I cannot believe this. He's running for a mile as he's watching his daughter float down the stream. And then finally, he gives up, and she continues to go, and they never found her. And it's like, it's just not fair. But John, I know you got another thought, but let me just close this by saying that there's a powerful conclusion that this world, on this side of heaven, we're never going to fully resolve everything. Because that's how Asaph, he resolved it by saying in verse 13 of Psalm 73, that he looked towards eternity, and he went into the sanctuary of God, and he saw what was going to happen on the final day, and he recognized that complete resolution was going to happen then and not now. And so we're kind of left with partial answers, not full ones.
One last thought. You brought it up, and I think you'll develop this more, and that is crises as a character test. Lori and I just this last week saw the film Courageous. If you haven't seen it, you should see it. And in there was a fellow who needed this job, and his boss calls him in and tells him to do something to be a team player that would be, in essence, cheating, lying, and said, come back and tell me if you're going to be a team player. Turns out it was a test, a character test. And I think, I'm sure you developed this, sometimes a crisis can be a test of our character. Who will we turn to when things are tough and we have no place else to go?
I want to, in closing, in response to that, John, share with all of you Job chapter 23, verse 10, where chapter 23, in my opinion, is the height of his complaint about where God is. God, you are just not there. And that he just demanded that God come to him where he would have an argument with God, and that he says, I'm going to win because I'm innocent. But in verse 10, he says, he expresses that even though he didn't understand, God knew what he was doing, and that somehow, in the end, he will be refined as pure gold. And so there's that character refinement. Though you may not understand it, that's definitely part of God's agenda. And so I know some great songs that came out of Job 23, verse 10. But that's a verse we got to all put in our back pockets and take out and say, hey, I don't get it, but he is refining me like the refiner's fire. And so where's Dave Peregrine? Okay, we're going to have to sing that song one of these days. Okay, Refiner's Fire. That is a great song. I don't know if it came from that, but it expresses that theology of character refinement. Now, John, I got a question for you. We're right up against the clock, and I know that after break, we're going to have your very special show for the very first time.
Yes.
So why don't you take about 60 seconds and tell the audience a little bit about your show. You may not want to reveal any surprises, but what are we in store for today?
Well, it's sort of like holding the tiger by the tail. You don't know whether to hold on or let go because we're going to be fast-moving, deal with issues. We're going to try to build on the focus of what Tay has taught during the first session. And tonight it's going to be about how God tests you to the very end. We'll have someone with a very special testimony of how they endured that, what they learned through that. And my plan is to have special guests who are illustrative of the topics that we're going to be dealing with, who have lived through some of these things. So it's real life stuff. It's not ivory tower. It's what's really happening with people that we know.
All right. So what's coming up is Live Streams Live with John Stewart and Trisha Davies and a very special guest. We're going to give you a 5-minute break. If you have little ones and you want to go home right now, it's almost 7:30. This is a good time for you to go. Otherwise, they're going to go to the gym and have great time with the Hockey Man tonight. So you guys have 5 minutes to get up and stretch and visit the table. Pick up the almond latte and hot chocolate. We'll see you back in 5 minutes for Live Streams Live. Thank you.